Oh, hello. You found Waypoints, where the Waypoint staff and friends take a break to nerd out and deep dive on the culture, art, and entertainment that's been inspiring and provoking us lately. Gathered around the table this week, we've got Patrick Klepek.
That wasn't it. I tried. That's just never. No, just I'll come back around to me.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah.
Renata Price.
Hey.
Cado, just
Producer
edit
Ricardo
in,
Contreras.
Just edit in like a much
Shut
better.
the fuck up, Patrick.
Or like, can you layer that a couple of times?
Wow.
Shut
Like
the fuck
echo
up.
that they do in. Is this
We're
how
all
you get
fucking
Is this how you get the podcast?
yelling.
This is Rob trying to get the podcast back on the rails, but just yelling, "Shut the fuck up!"
Which, by the way, isn't what he normally does, which is extra funny to me.
We didn't get to do a clap on stream while doing a live podcast. No, we were told we couldn't do that, and then also it's just shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck
up. Today we're going to be talking about the Halo TV series on Paramount Plus, starring Pablo Schreiber, Natasha McElhone, and Yaren Ha. Despite a bumpy start, we ended up sticking with the show and going on our own individual journeys with Halo.
We sure did, huh?
Despite a rocky start, implies some things about later episodes that I don't think a lot of
But
us
I don't
share.
think it's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
That suggests that the show became good.
God damn it. So, I didn't hear it, by the way, Cado. Did we ever hit the soundboard?
No, I didn't.
Patrick, we had it. That's the thing. We had
thing.
the whole cue.
I didn't. I was too busy fucking. There was text on my screen that I didn't know where it came from. I got rid of it. We're all good. Now I'm ready for the next one.
Okay.
What is the cue?
Well, Patrick, every time you were moved to do the Halo choral chant, we've got that on the soundboard for this episode.
Oh man, if only this was in the show at some point. Damn, that would have been really cool. That would have been cool if the Halo sound was in the Halo show.
That was startling to hear. That was incredibly startling. I love it. Okay, so yes, I would say our initial impressions. Pardon?
I was just saying, I want to be fair to the show. They put the Halo sound in there for about 6 consecutive seconds.
It's in there. Very low.
And then repeated that a few times. It does seem to follow some rules. You have to bear with us. I think this call is a little bit laggy, so we're going to be wrestling with that a little bit as well. So when we started watching the series, I think we all agreed the pilot episode was pretty weak, and yet a few of us intrepidly continued watching and then decided we all had to watch. So I think to start this out is like, here's my question. Is this a bad show? Is it a pretty average, like vintage sci-fi channel quality show? Or is it prestige TV?
None of the above.
If you separate the Halo television show from the Halo property as a whole, right? Which I will do. I will happily do. I can say that it is one of the worst pieces of television I've ever engaged with.
You need to watch more TV. You need to watch You need to watch more TV.
No, I know.
I just have to immediately like
There's real bad TV out there.
I know there's real bad TV out there. I don't fuck with it.
Right.
I don't fuck with it because I have self-respect.
Yeah.
I have respect for my time. And when I watch this show, I see a show that does not have basic character arcs or development over the course of its 9-episode arc, with the exception of Kai 125, who is the best part of this show and the only good part of the television show Halo.
Well, so here's one thing I was interesting watching this show is that adaptations are weird. Like, I don't get hung up on. I think adaptations should essentially distance themselves from the source material as much as they like to do something interesting. And the parts of this show that I do like are the parts that make me go, huh, that's not what I thought you would have done with an adaptation of Halo. And I at least
Sorry. Continue.
I respect it for that degree. Like, some of the messiness comes out of, I mean, this show has been in development for like 15, 20 years. Spielberg at one point came out on stage at a E3 and was like, we're making a Halo show. And like, maybe at that point it was a movie. I can't even tell. Okay, it's gonna get old really fast.
I know.
This has had, I think, 3 different showrunners, including a different showrunner that is going to be running season 2 that dropped out after season 1. And then like the showrunner that was doing the beginning of season 1 switched halfway through season 1. It's just like a really messy, but I don't know. But Rob, I get the sense, based on, if we were to split this call into 2, is I don't know this is a good show. I don't know what a good Halo show is. I think Halo is not a particularly adaptable property. I don't know what a Halo TV show that would be good is. And the thing they settled on in this show of, which I don't think it does exceptionally well, but the idea that, hey, we're going to do a squad of 4, like, tortured soldiers that, like, learn to like each other and discover humanity, like, is like a kernel of, like, it's not what I would have thought from a Halo show, but I'd rather that than what you probably otherwise would get from most Halo adaptations, even if I concede that what it does with that material is not A+. But if you were to tell me on paper, it's not what I would have expected, and it was more interesting than what I expected.
Rand, it looks like you want to say something.
The interesting thing to me there is I would have expected, so the thing that you described, Patrick, is what if you asked me what a Halo show should be as someone who likes Halo a lot and is familiar with the fiction, I would tell you that is what the Halo show should be. And that is sadly not the show I felt like we got even a little bit, right? Like, they don't grow. Like, that's the problem that I have. Like, the fundamental, like, character relationships are completely sidelined for a story about Master Chief. And this show's, like, fundamental failing is that it chose to be about Master Chief, which is the worst possible decision they could have made, both in terms of, like, a show about Halo for people who like Halo, but also about, like, what they can do and what narrative space they can play in with the property. And I think that, the ensemble cast would have been better.
Like, I think in the earlier discussion we had about it, like, honestly, I think the way, like, the reason I brought it forward onto Dawn in that initial discussion is, like, I think that probably is your smart way into a Halo show. It's about, like, making it about characters in the universe, and then Master Chief kind of haunts that universe, and, like, is present, but isn't necessarily your primary point of view, and maybe is never your point of view in one version you could construct of how.
But they're never gonna. Halo. No one is gonna greenlight that show. That's the thing. That is what I. That's what I mean by Halo being a kind of unadaptable property. Is you were both absolutely correct, and the show tries to some degree.
I think Halo fans would watch it,
that.
But I don't think, like, I think people would be really confused about, like, it's not anything. Like, at that point, what about it is particularly Halo? And you'd have people being like, well, it's really faithful to a lot of, like, the world building that happens in Halo, but also isn't really very much like the games at all, which would be a problem for adaptation as well.
Here is my counterpoint. Here's my counterpoint to this. You can very easily have it. Okay, Master Chief, people do not, the average person on the street would be able to recognize a picture of Master Chief as the guy from Halo, but would not be able to tell you that guy's name is Master Chief. That guy's name is John 117. That's just not in the public consciousness. They might know the term Master Chief, but they might not even have it connected to Halo, right? And so I think that, like, the armor is distinctive enough that people could see a Spartan wearing Spartan armor and go, that is a Halo show. Even if it is not Master Chief, the armor as a design is recognizable enough that people do recognize that.
So the direction they did go, though, was they do try to figure out, if we make this about Master Chief and have him as, like, the primary protagonist of the story, then what does that look like? And honestly, for me, I think there are parts, like, so this Halo series is really a pastiche of a lot of different things. Like, I was shocked the degree to which it is directly quoting Equilibrium, with the whole like them pulling out their emotion chips. And so like now they're like remorseless killing machines who are conditioned to massacre hundreds of people, but with feelings. And they have like big moments of like, what? Music? Art? The sun on my skin? And it's like kind of hokey. It's kind of funny.
Kai has that, but the Chief doesn't really, aside from like his childhood trauma stuff, right? Like
no. He goes to a public concert and is like,
yeah, there's a whole like half an episode about
and
this.
dogs.
Like he's like on the subway, sees like two people kind of like doing some public affection, and he's like,
yeah, but he doesn't react really. It's like, I don't know. Like Kai's reaction is like,
it's obvious to me that he's reacting. The problem I have is that the show does not actually let him have a character arc, because Master Chief, part of the problem with like adapting Halo and adapting Master Chief specifically is that Master Chief is both like, is the face of the brand, right? And you cannot have the face of Microsoft's brand be an objectively bad person, right? He cannot kill Quan, right? That is the thing, is that the onset of the show starts with him having already completed the hardest part of the character arc, which is going against the UNSC's wishes, right? Like it skips to the end point, and then the whole rest of the show is like, everyone's going like, ah, damn, Master Chief, you sure used to be different. And if they had shown us what different actually looks like in the text for a significant period of time, that arc actually lands, as opposed to feeling like a switch was flicked off screen that we never actually get to see. That progression doesn't happen. Like him taking out the emotion chip is fine. It's like a scene that could have weight, but it felt like he was already there, right? Like the emotion chip coming out doesn't feel like we're seeing a different guy after he takes that out. It's still the same guy. Like the character arc doesn't progress from there.
Well, because and one of the things that like drove me at like one of the like fatal flaws of this first season is the decision to separate what appeared to have been our two main characters at the end of the first episode. I mean, one of the questions someone wrote in the chat was like, "What was the point of Madrigal?" And it's like, I don't know. Like to establish a magic portal that has no relevance to the finale. But I think exactly what you're talking about, you know, Ren, in which I think Rob and I were giving the pilot a little bit benefit of the doubt, in which like, look, pilots are messy. You're trying to establish the stakes and broad character arcs, and and hopefully they can slow things down. And essentially, even though we have the hard pivot happen at the end of the pilot, they'll unpack that over the course of the season. And essentially, even if you don't have the character arc, like this other character that it has essentially been on like the punishing end of the Spartans, like as war machines for decades. Like as those two learn to like become, you know, like kind of wolf and cub sort of situation, like essentially what the Mandalorian does to some degree, that will end up reflecting and developing the humanity of Master Chief. And instead, they just jettison her off to just an incredibly weak, like, where they're like, well, we don't want to lose the character, but we don't want to give them anything to do. And they also undercut a lot of what I thought was going to be the development of John as a character. And then the other ways they try to accomplish that are just not nearly as interesting as just having this character that was at the barrel end of your weapons, and like you were supposed to act. And it was just that really, I never understood why, especially given how the season ends. It's like, okay, well, maybe it's all going to make sense. And like the plot threads, well, again, they'll be messy, but they'll kind of tie together in some emotionally resonant way. And there'll be a payoff from the pilot in the finale with those two characters. And that's just like, no, like just not the case.
Can I sketch out? So the sort of one of the arcs I went on this is like, I was like, okay, they're doing some setting establishing, and then we're going to put these pieces in play. And I figured they would be put in play in a way that like was somehow connected. And instead, I think a big part of like my growing issues with the season, at least, is like, wow, like everyone is sort of atomized in this story, where, you know, you have at the start, Master Chief makes the decision to, I'm not going to kill this kid. We're gonna go on the run, and we're gonna run to my old friend Soren, who is the one kid who fled the Spartan program with, if not John's help, at least not his active hindrance.
How many seconds did he give him? Like that was like a point.
Gave him like 10 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. He asked for 10. He gave him 5.
10, yeah. So the thing is, he flees with Quan. He flees with Quan to Soren's base, where he's become a pirate king in an asteroid field. Things are wild there, by the way. I do not know what is it is. Half of it is the set of Demolition Man. Half of it is like they raided the props for Moulin Rouge, and like,
Oh my God.
I do not understand. And like, I posted a picture on Twitter. He's got a smoking jacket, which I approve of, but they're like, make it space piratey. And so there's like tire tread lapel on the smoking jacket, which is very weird. But he leaves Quan with Soren, and that ends up being the like lone wolf and cub type thing, where it's like, okay, but like he should have been dumped off on this mercenary bandit pirate king character. Meanwhile, John goes back to Halsey and continues to commune with the with the artifact, and the stories don't really reconnect, and they're increasingly told completely separately from each other. And I think where I like maybe my worst moment of this, my least favorite episode, is actually the one where they're like, a lot of cool things. We saw the actual Halo, the sacred ring. That's right. And you know it's a big deal because when they talk about the sacred ring, you get that theme. Then you get some prog rock as like McKee and John are like astral projecting onto the ring. But we cut away from that to the really underbaked Madrigal plot. And it wraps up. They wrap it up in one episode, one really long episode that is basically playing to all the weaknesses of that first episode, before we just cut back to the rest of the Halsey Master Chief shit. Like,
what episode was that?
One is being...
It was episode 7, Inheritance.
7, okay. And then the last two are
Episode 7, Inheritance, yes.
It's like they suddenly just went, all right, so we gotta stop cutting between things because nobody wants to watch this plot. Just put it all into one episode and let's sweep it out of the way and go back to the Chief.
I think it's 3 good performers, by the way. Like, I think some of the strongest supporting cast in the show are trapped in the fucking Madrigal plot. One of them is just blown up. He's a character actor. Like, it is his destiny to be murked in every show he is in. What's his name? The guy who took over Madrigal.
Guan.
Oh,
Vishnar.
Fucking the guy from
it's Guam
Burn
Vishnar
Gorman. He's in he's in that season of The Expanse as the villain. He is a mysterious villain.
Burn Gorman from Pacific Rim.
Yeah, and he rules.
He's in everything. Like, yeah.
But here, playing a non-character.
Yeah.
Nothing for him to do except
when he's
look at a VFX like gas pipeline and be like, oh no, and that's it.
The scene where he's in the fucking car just monologuing to himself is one of the funniest things I've ever fucking seen. It was one of the funniest fucking things. It just quietly to himself being like, I'm evil and British. just fucking.
So they
ridiculous.
gave him nothing, like, and which is.
Hang on, they gave him some Milton quotes.
Yeah, they gave him Milton quotes.
We saw.
Oh my God,
we saw 2 asses in this show. Like, we saw Master Cheeks, and then we also saw his ass. Like, when he's in the bath at that one point.
Long for
yes,
6 consecutive minutes.
There's just nothing for him except to just chew scenery, and he does that okay. But it's almost like a testament.
There's no scenery to chew, Patrick.
That's what I mean.
No,
it's a testament to how weak
God.
Madrigal is that his mouth is open. He's looking for it and he can't find it.
Set.
All he wants to do is...
Their best set is the interior of like a Pathfinder. It's terrible.
It's so bad. It's so bad. It's so fucking bad.
And so like I guess the other thing is this. I think the other thing that's really disappointing about the I think the Quan arc in particular and Madrigal, it starts out as we're trying to establish that there's this ongoing civil war between like the colonists and the UNSC. But the vision, like, there are no
feels like
politics to that war.
It feels like Rob, it's like one of those things where you're like 4 seasons into a sci-fi show and they're like, hey, we want to do a backdoor pilot. And they introduce something like this so they can go do a spin-off and cash in
The Quan spin-off. The Quan spin-off is going to come.
The Quan.
Yeah.
Yes. This, and it feels like that's what like this, like that episode in like, Inheritance is like, hey, here's our backdoor pilot. Do people respond to this character? Well, we'll go do something else. And it's like, no, we're in the first season of the main show. And I thought she was character B. And it turns out she's not. Although I'm sure that portal or whatever will play into
Oh my God.
some matter of importance
portal.
later.
Yeah.
The stupid fucking portal. Okay, the other thing that really bothers me about the like Quan arc, and specifically Rob was talking to about the lack of like the insurrectionists just being a non-presence in the show, is the fact that the insurrectionists in Halo, this is one of the like comparisons I will make to the original property, in which the show has like failed in this case. The insurrectionists have politics. There are politics in Halo about who the insurrectionists are and what they want. And the show does not only sideline them, it also actively denies that they ever had politics in the first place. And that's the thing that really fucking gets me, is that like Quan Ha's dad did not actually want independence for Madrigal because it is important to have independence for an Outer Rim world that is being actively exploited by the UNSC. No, he wanted independence because of a special prophecy. And that shit drives me up a fucking wall because it is actively removing meaning and context from a work that you have made. That is the dissolution
That's the whole
of
show,
meaning as
though.
opposed to the
The
production
whole
of it.
show
It's
is
fucking embarrassing.
magical prophecy. Like they even do that for John. Like they undercut his whole arc. It was like, I don't know, you're a chosen.
But the thing I'll say is John ends up in that mythological territory. Like Halo does go in that direction a little bit, but like the fact that Quan's story is their politics are bloodline, like magical destiny shit. Like the fact that when she's like, I'm going to go there and reconnect to all my dad's old generals. And it's all like aunties and uncles who are basically like, oh, your family is what we needed to lead us, but it's all over now. We've been co-opted by Venture, who supposedly used to be one of us, but isn't. And then Quan's path forward is to, go on this like magical journey to learn about the fact that, her dad cashed out his political program for a magical destiny to become like honestly, it's like Warcraft, like elven, like guardian of the Moonwell or whatever type shit. It really is a bit of like Warcraft 3 parachuting into this. It's really frustrating.
And the Master Chief plot isn't that much more coherent. Like, it's not that much better. Like, if you ask someone to describe the plot of the Halo television show, what happens in the television show Halo? Not much actually happens over the course of the TV show Halo, which is like fine for me. I'm happy to have like a slow burn or character studies or something like that. But like the actual movement in terms of what happened in the world and what the consequences were, basically nothing.
There's
apparently a war on.
I think the John stuff.
Did you hear about this war with the Covenant?
I don't know. I think that might be in season 4.
There's Cado. I want to point out people in the Covenant.
I want to point out for 1 second that what seems to be like the high command of the Covenant and fucking John Halo are in the same room at one point, and they keep talking about how he has to grab the fucking artifacts to win this war. It's like, why don't you just murk the fucking dudes in the floating chairs sitting up here? Like, is that really about?
It's because it's the best CG in the show, and we don't want to get rid of it.
He hasn't gotten his double jump.
Right.
They can't get up there.
The hook shot there. The hook shots. They can't take the hook shot. That's in
they don't have the infinite hook shot
away.
Motherfucker could jump up there. Did
I
you
did
see
like
that
watching
fucking
them.
drop?
They
They
were
should've
the
just
best.
dropped on their heads.
They should have. They could have wiped out Covenant High Command by just dropping Spartans like straight
literally on
into
them.
that temple.
Turning
What
them
would've been
into
done.
human bullets.
But hold on, like I actually do think the John stuff after that first episode for me worked a bit better because it plays to one of their best performers, Natasha Michelone, and it really starts centering on this really horrific relationship that her Halsey has with John, and really everybody, but especially John, where he still views her as the one person in this fucked up military machine that he can trust. And she has, like, he has always been the special one of the Spartans for her, and she's always been the person that he feels closest to. And his slow unpacking of that via, like, the Vision stuff is corny, but I did really enjoy, like, when he realizes they have to go back to the planet he is from, the planet he is remembering. And they go there, and she's there with her creepy assistant guy who 100% has sex with dead bodies. Like, absolutely.
so
Like, this guy
Yo,
has the, like,
100%.
this guy, guy has, like,
I mean, they imply like when there's an early like Halsey clone, and he is like caressing her briefly for a moment, right?
oh yeah, he's going to molest the clone, except Halsey walks in, and then he's like, you have a beautiful brain or something like that, and vivisects her. But they're on that planet, and Master Chief is starting to recall things, and the realization that, like, that they need the information he has. They want him to, like, complete these recollections and, like, follow the breadcrumb trail around. But also the growing alarm as, like, he's remembering things that would really rather he didn't. And the sort of the realization that I think something this series carries off well is that there is no, at least so far, there is no floor to Halsey's moral degradation, right? Like, there is nothing that is a step too far. Every time you're like, you know, surely something in this is genuine. It isn't. Like, every single thing she does is instrumentalized. And I think that part of the show is carried out pretty well. The growing alienation of her from everybody, the exposure of, like, who she is, and then John's realization that he really is alone, you know, in this, you know, as Cortana alludes to later, alone in this universe.
I think this is true, and Halsey's stuff is the best done stuff in the show. I think one of the problems, one of the frustrations I have with it is that the way that they handle the Spartans undercuts it. The, like, hormone regulation and the, like, mind control, like, brainwashing stuff, to me undercuts some of the best ideas of instrumentalization in like Halsey's character. Because, like, to take an example from a scene in Halo Reach. In Halo Reach, Halsey hates the Spartan 3s because they are worse than her precious baby Spartan 2s. And there's a scene where the Spartan 3s walk in and she gives them a ton of shit, and she turns to George and she gives him 1 ounce of kindness, and he just completely melts. And, like, the thing about Halsey that I think is really interesting is the way in which, like, you don't need mind control. You don't need mind control to make these people like this. You just need years of indoctrination and emotional manipulation. And I feel like having the chip undercuts the ways in which Halsey's character is built around emotional manipulation and instrumentalization.
It undercuts the pilot episode too, where, like, Chief has that moment of, like, doubt with Quan. It's like, where did that come from if the chip is still in his butt? Right? Like, then you later kind of retcon that into being a very weird, like, what the fuck was that about then? Right?
So actually, I think they kind of carry this off well. Like, what comes through at the end of the series, when Kai is calling them out, like, you guys really gonna shoot me? Nobody is being mind controlled. They are responding to conditioning, and the, like, emotion suppression just makes it really easy for them to do without question. Right. John still has had the questions that are sort of, like, even without being, like, having an emotional stake in it, he still has had these questions at the start. It is the removal of the like emotion regulating chip that is about him realizing that he's like an individual, like and a human actor who can be actualized. And so I think they carry off well the fact that like what she's trying to do via Cortana is really qualitatively different from what she's got with the other Spartans, where she can just like give them direct orders and they're conditioned to respond without question. It never crosses their mind to like hold off on fighting Kai and John. But
except at the end when they do, and they still have those chips implanted, right? Like they make an emotional like argument to not like he makes an emotional argument to not kill.
Yeah.
Like he like says like we're being mind controlled. Like he does the whole thing. Like that is an emotional argument being made to the other two Spartans.
And Riz does hesitate, but it is because it is starting to make real sense. Like it is like she went hard
I feel like
on John.
that makes
the
more
previous
sense
episode.
if there isn't a magical butt chip that washes away your emotions, right? Like they undercut themselves and their own plot lines by being like, look, there's this thing that the reason they can't get out from under it is because it is implanted in them, right? And like I don't know, like that whole thing makes it super messy and like it doesn't like if it was just the conditioning, just like the manipulation, I can see the end working out, but introducing this like sci-fi MacGuffin of like, oh, they actually need to remove this from their bodies to feel emotion again, totally killed that whole argument for me.
It very much is like, again, they're really high on Equilibrium. And it's been long enough that not many people have seen Equilibrium, so they're able to pull off that thing. We're like, man, it's going to be people are going to love watching these Spartans have big feelings. But I do feel like they do an okay job justifying that the chip is there to help the compartmentalization like hold. Whereas
the chip's also a shortcut, right? Because like where we are introduced into the show, because they make the choice that John has to have that turn early on, and we don't like work up to that moment. Like we can't witness what like the gaslighting and the emotional manipulation, and so the chip is basically just like a fast forward button for
right.
It's a convenient plot device to advance the storytelling that they can't depict on screen. But we see some of that. Like essentially, they try to backdoor that with John and Halsey over the course of the show, right? Like, hey, look at how she treats John as he is attempting to learn the truth of himself, is your way of understanding how she must have treated. Yeah, I'm not saying it works, but it's like that is the decision the show essentially makes is trying is
to me
do
the
that.
backdooring totally undercuts the emotional stakes they try to set up with the manipulation, right? Like that's
and it's also just like that is my frustration with this as like a piece of television, as like a constructed TV show, is that I think that they are trying to use a bunch of shorthand so they don't have to make the longer show that is like that accepts that it can't be about Master Chief from day one, and like actually starts with what does it mean to be trained? Like what is the origins of the Spartan program? Like the actual anthology series is so much more interesting, and I think so much like better television, and still carries the Halo branding that like using this shorthand just in every time they use it just pisses me off or frustrates me more, because it feels like lazy storytelling.
You know, Ren, I think what you're keying on here a little bit is the fact that you're right. Like it should have been an anthology, like set in this universe, and like focusing more on things in the Halo universe, and maybe John isn't that much of a character. But what if he had a girlfriend?
That's such a good. That's such an astute point, Rob. Is that it is. What if he did have sex? You know,
fuck.
Because he never.
He made love.
Is the implication? Well, yeah, that's. So there are so many twists and turns between those two characters in that specific episode. Like, I am a traitor to the human race. God. Actually, I'm not anymore, and I'm gonna take out this magic finger blade that I've got.
God,
the grossest fucking scene.
Yeah, by the
and
way.
It was great. It was
Grossest,
great.
most uncomfortable
No.
tone shift on the planet. No, it was not great. I regret to
tonal
inform
shift
you that was not great.
caused
That
whiplash.
was not great.
Well,
Like,
look, it's
Body
actually
horror doesn't
one of-
affect me. Price being like, wait, hold on, you're doing what to that fingernail?
Fuck.
Well, but I think it's actually in a show that deeply struggled to communicate like the emotional interiority of its characters. And yes, in that episode, both John and that character whose name I do not remember because they did not make much of an imprint on me.
Maki?
McKee.
Maki. M-A-K-E-E. Yeah. Maki.
You know, I think the body horror is meant to like, hey, you know, yes, have we done the work to establish how this character has gotten to this point? No. But is this so upsetting? Does it suggest to you how painful it is for this character? Yes. And so, like, would that have been more effective if that was paired with a proper arc for that character? Sure. But I found that to at least be shorthand effective to communicate, like, the importance of the scene to the character, even if it was, like we've said, like, in so many ways undercut by the ordering of things. Again, like, you have, if the magical episode doesn't exist, maybe you get more time for all these characters to actually talk through these things as opposed to, you know, a minute and a half removal of a fingernail to communicate emotions.
I will say, I appreciated the fact that, like, the UNSC just fucking sucks. Like, they are the authors of so much of the destruction that's barreling down on them in the series. Like, they're
So bad.
they are all horrible.
And also don't strike me as like horribly competent either, right? Like it doesn't necessarily, they're not like this like slick like empire that is just running on, like, no, they're just big and they suck and there's just no, like, it's just kind of hard to bump up
They
against
can't
their
even
armor.
fire
but-
Halsey right.
They can't fire Halsey right. And the other thing that, like, again undercuts the show is the fact that the show cannot, and this is part of like my central thesis about the show shouldn't have been about Master Chief, is that like Master Chief cannot do the kind of violence that the UNSC needs to do to actually look like villains in like proper ways, right? Like they just aren't gonna show Master Chief the face of Xbox like murk a kid. Like that's just not going to, that's just like not true. They're not gonna watch him like
Well,
either.
even the terrible thing he does do, which implies he's done many of these terrible things, is only described by another character because they can't act for the show. For the show is like what it really wants you to buy into. They can't actually depict the character doing because
Also,
Well, they make Quan
then-
very chill about the whole "you killed my mom" thing. Like,
yeah.
very
Real quick.
chill about, oh, crazy, we have this connection. Like, my mom was slaughtered by UNSC commandos at the big Terracell gathering meeting. He's like, that's coincidence. That's funny. I was there at the Terracell gathering meeting, and I killed everyone. One of them is probably your mom. Thought it was a little weird. And she's like,
also, he also only dropped off a bomb there. You know, it wasn't a direct killing. He didn't see anyone. He just bombed the place where he knew a bunch of people were. It's still removed, you know?
And so if you have your perspective character, your perspective military operative, who is unable to ever like actually be shown on screen doing the things that defines your evil space empire, it'll never read as bad. And like part of the thing about Halo and like part of the thing about like I think Warhammer too, like in certain eras of Warhammer 40K to an extent, from what I understand, is that like there is the retroactive justification of war crimes based on the current situation. That is like one of the core tenets of Halo, is basically like the Spartans were built to kill insurrectionists, and then the Covenant showed up, and suddenly the UNSC could be like, this was totally cool because we needed them to fight the aliens. Am I right? And this show never actually does the work of showing the Spartans like doing the bad things that they are defined by. It's I don't know. It's
Well,
extremely
because, and this is, I think this is like, the games don't either, right? The games don't either, because you need to be the hero fighting the Covenant, fighting the Flood, and it's there in the world building. You can go look it up. Maybe it's in some text, I guess, but it's not. just playing those games, campaign start to finish, at no point are you coming away feeling like, damn, I've played a true monster that is.
But they don't
forced
give a
into
fuck about the games.
But I'm saying
said
that's. Yeah, but they still do care about the games. I mean, like, there's a whole shitty Doom first person sequence like towards the end that betrays like the decent amount of like combat that like the times when the action does work in this.
Oh,
it's terrible. It's terrible. It was. I was like, don't, you know, like there are a handful of times with the sequence where they're trying to get the artifact, the second artifact out, where they clearly spend like most of the budget of the season, where they're like trying to get the artifact onto Halsey's ship. Like that is like some of the best action in the show. When Chief takes like one of the Covenant ships and like fucking parachutes it down like he's in Fortnite, all that stuff is it was pretty good, at least relative to the other action in the show that is kind of lackluster. I don't know, and that first person sequence just it just don't ape. And again, I think it speaks to the identity. I speaks to the identity crisis of the show that is wrapped up in an identity crisis of the games that is wrapped up in an identity crisis of the world building of Halo, and all those things are in such weird tension that it's like, who is this show for? Why? Who's watching? And I think you can start to explain a bunch of the tension that then exists and a bunch of the fault lines in the storytelling.
Right. Like Halo exists as I was like started a piece yesterday where I like wrote Halo exists as three distinct entities in the cultural consciousness. The first is as a thing that happens in the background of people's lives as like the face of Xbox. You see commercials of it on TV and you hear maybe like a kid or a coworker talk about Halo, right? You are aware of its existence. You're aware there's a guy in a green suit, right? And there's a big robot man, right? That is the first instance in which Halo exists in the cultural consciousness. The second instance is as the like popular first-person shooter that people play and have a connection to, whether it be the campaign or the like large-scale multiplayer, right? Those are the things. Those are the second incarnation. And then the third and final incarnation is as Halo, the like large sci-fi universe that is filled with a bunch of different stuff and is like, for the most part, a broad critique of like the like fascism and like the military, right? And like the military industrial complex. And another comparison I've seen is like Starship Troopers, right? Starship Troopers plays the film, not the original book, plays its like satire extremely straight. It like the premise of that movie is like, I'm going to show you what a perfect fascist world looks like, and it fucking sucks. like it is perpetual war. It is beautiful people engaging in perpetual war. And that itself is like kind of embarrassing and shitty. And Halo plays it even straighter than that. And like, that is the core of the critique of the UNSC, is that it's doing the Starship Troopers things even straighter. And I think it fails in the video games to actually get that across, but I don't think it wasn't there from the onset.
I will say, I think the fact that they draw the parallel between, like, for instance, McKee's, one of her major traumas that we see is the fact that, like, the Covenant appoint guards over their human colonies to sort of keep people producing resources and, basically doing prison guard shit. And they use, like, cattle prod electric batons to just, like, scorch the shit out of her shoulder when she's a kid. And the fact that, like, as she is trying to raise the alarm about the fact that Halsey has gone rogue and it has the Spartans lying in wait for John, that unfortunately coincides with the fact that Miranda completes her audio production work doing cleanup on the podcast recording they did of that entire UNSC ship being destroyed.
That like DE plot of like, no one thought to ask the Spartans, hey, seems like you picked up a little bit of their language. The show implies through that plot thread that how many years? Do we know how many years we're into the war at this point? Like during the show, like a while, right? 5.
It's about 10 years into the war. It's about 5 or 10 years.
Okay, so 10 years into the war, no one's thought we should try and understand what these motherfucking aliens are saying.
Also, the Spartans understand Sangheli, because they've heard these guys begging for their lives so many times. Oh, that phrase? That phrase means, I'm a little bitch, please don't kill me. Please, God, please spare me.
Well,
I love it when they say that.
That is
My
the
favorite
best scene.
grunt
Like,
quip
that is
from Halo.
that is one of, for me, the best scenes in the show. I think the frustrating thing for me with Miranda is that like Miranda is actually the second most compelling character on the show for me. Number one is Kai, is the best done character on the show. Number two is Miranda. They are the two like best, like most compelling characters who have arcs in the show versus Halsey, who's like a nightmare monster woman who never has an arc, but is like cool. And I like when she's on screen because she does things, right? The interaction between Miranda and the Spartans, I think, is actually a pretty well, it's like probably the best done like comedy scene in the entire show. Like there's banter, Spartans banter. They have little jokes with each other, even with the hormone suppressant, they have their shitty little jokes and like they shit post and banter with one another. And then the follow up to that scene where Miranda and Kai sit down and like go through the language together and then have like an actual conversation about their experience growing up and the feelings that they have is really good. And like a braver show would have leaned into that and would have like leaned further into the tension between Miranda and the Spartans and leaned further into specifically the relationship between Miranda and Kai. Also, they have
We're
like
saying Miranda and Kai should have.
The most.
I would say, like you seem to be leading to the inevitable conclusion that they should kiss.
I mean, listen, the framing of the show occasionally does imply that. Like there are shots in the show that like the framing is reserved for its shitty romance plots. And they do get that framing, right? Like Master Chief and McKee are framed in some similar ways to Miranda and Kai. And like that is the much more compelling relationship than anything else.
I agree. Someone deserved to find love in this show, and it was not John.
I do not much like. I like the idea of Kai. I really wish she had a character note besides like baby's first acid trip. Like the entire like once she removes that chip, the entire show she's going through it in full like, oh my God, I'm so high. I am so high. I hope nobody can tell how high I am. Oh my God, ready for Spartan work, sir. Okay, we're gonna go fight those guys. Okay.
Nobody's gonna notice. Hey, you're cool. You're cool. Breathe. Drink some water.
God. Oh my God, people are getting killed all around me. Oh, this is so bad. This is like, that guy just got imploded. The Marines are all dead. Oh shit.
She does go, like, compared to John, who I know that he is like Spartan A, but the way they make her emotionally fall apart, like, does not feel in key with like what happened to John. And yet they kind of like lean a bunch of that on Kai specifically in a way that would have made sense up front, where it's like, yeah, John had his own response to the removal of the chip. Kai's gonna have her own response to the removal of the chip, but she just like never gets her shit together until like the very end, where they give her a half decent heroic moment.
Yeah, I think
Zarvis in the chat says, now I want to actually see Rob on acid. I just wanted to note that I agree. I
think that like I think that you're right. Like the way in which she approached, like the direction she was given in a lot of scenes is very much like, oh, I'm so high, and it is really frustrating because I think she actually does a really good job in the moments where she actually gets to express emotion to other people. I think she's doing like a great job, and I wish there had been more of it. Again, I wish there had been more between Miranda and Kai, because like they again had actual on-screen chemistry together and like had reasons to talk to one another.
One of my favorite moments too was when, because the other thing to remember is like, you kind of don't know what you're uncorking with a Spartan when they start like feeling and like being able to sort of like have independent will that gets translated in action. And a beat I loved is when she and Miranda are having a nice chat about like translation and shit, and Kai's like, but we both know you're not really being honest with me. And like you'd see Miranda's stomach just drop, and you can feel how like, yo, these are superhumans encased in armor who can like rip you in half, right? And it's just like suddenly that little bit of joking, like bearing of fangs. And it turns out that she's like trying to connect over, okay, like this thing I did with my hair isn't really working, is it? And they're trying to have that moment.
And
but
it's
the
so
fact
cute.
that it is, yeah, but it also like has that little bit of like, oh, where's this going? Because when a Spartan is like sort of pulls that whiplash, it's different.
The one time
think
they give her a little more to do is when she is with the other Marines, and they're increasingly having her pull like heavier and heavier shit.
Objects.
And like, this is one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. Is like, I wish the energy of this scene, like, it just, like, it had a propulsion to character and action, and like everything was like working like how you want like a show like this to work. And I just wish there had been more of that like throughout the entire series, because like that actually gave her something to do with that sort of manic energy, and that felt in character. It actually was development through action, like as opposed to dialogue, as opposed to a monologue. And I just wish there had been more of that, because I was cackling during that entire sequence.
It's so good. And to like quickly return to like Miranda for a second, I also think that like Miranda, the way she interacts with other characters and the way she interacts with the Spartans is super interesting, because the show makes the obvious parallel between her and her mother, right? Like they are very similar. They are like similarly mercenary at times, especially when it comes to emotion. But Miranda has limits that Halsey doesn't. And Miranda's limit hits her limits very quickly on the show. And I think that like them both being presented with like similar moments. So like if you compare Kai going to Miranda with John going to Halsey, it's like those scenes together in theory are really, really excellent. Right. But I think that the Halsey John stuff is done a little bit like it's just done so much worse than Kai and Miranda that it falls through. Because like, I don't know, I just think that like Miranda deciding actually I'm going to care about this person, and that is the thing that is going to separate me from my mother, is I think a good character arc that we don't get to see enough of her, because she starts the show as like, oh, I'm mad at my mom.
Yeah, I mean, I think the parallel, like for me, it feels like the show is drawing a much closer parallel between her and the Spartans, right? Like the actual child of Halsey, and then the like surrogate children, and both, and the fact that Miranda, I think in those conversations, again, that in that scene with Kai, where she sort of warns that, look, if I know Halsey, she doesn't tolerate like defects, gladly. The Miranda knowing that her mother is an amoral abuser, and then also being aware that like the Spartans are her kids who by conditioning can't see that and are completely shaped by it.
Yeah.
I think it's effective how they portray that in forming her relationship with the Spartans, where she has this like a complicated interaction with them, because she's aware of what was done to them. Yeah.
She also had the same emotional abuse from her mother, right? Like the Spartans and Miranda experienced the exact same forms of emotional like abuse and manipulation in different degrees. Miranda would have had that degree of abuse and manipulation if Halsey had spent any time with her and hadn't instead focused entirely on the Spartans as her special children. And that tension of like Miranda being like, I hate this woman and I hate that you are her favorites, is really strong and like drives so much of the relationship between Kai and Miranda for me, and why I wish it was like the centerpiece of the show as opposed to like a subplot. God, Kai rules. And when she kills the little worm man, when she fucking murks the little worm man at the end of the show by just going
very
bonk.
satisfying.
She literally just bonks him. She picks him up and bonks him into the fucking roof, and he's instantly dead.
And next, it's one of the few, like, there's a lingering shot on her face after that where she sort of takes in, like, she allowed her emotions to get, like, the better of her. She just whips that dude at the ceiling, destroys him. And there is, like, a little, like, nice beat there where she sort of is taking in, oh, shit. Did he deserve it? But I forgot what my hands can do. And
I just
thought that
killed
was
a person.
A
Yeah.
nice little moment. Yes.
I mean, between that and her getting over to the ship, the running sequence, it was like probably the best. I mean, there's some earlier parts with the elites, I guess, in those fights you can kind of see, but like it made the Spartans more scary than the other fights to me, especially because it was a human target at the end of that sequence. But we don't get enough of that, I feel like.
I just want to take a quick break for ads, and then we'll be back here on the stream. We'll just continue, but for the pod, we're gonna take a quick little break and then come back.
So I think one of the other things, I think Halsey's like last gambit at the end of this television show is really good in theory. Like I think that like Halsey making a Flash clone and being like, "Fuck you, I win," is a great Halsey move.
It got me in a storyline that was otherwise like you could anticipate every beat. I didn't see that one coming, and obviously they laid the groundwork for that earlier on, and I enjoyed that. It was one of those, okay, all right. Not many times in the show where I said you got me, and that bit got me a little bit, and it made me smile.
I do wish that they hadn't. I would be much more interested in seeing Miranda and Kai work through the fact that Halsey made a Flash clone. Like I almost wish that Kai had just fucking murked Halsey. Like bam, murked. Instead of Halsey escaping and then the Flash clone being the one who was found. I almost like the idea of Kai murdering the Flash clone and then Miranda being like doing an autopsy or something, and someone goes like, "Hey, that's a Flash clone," and then she's like, "God fucking damn it!" And they, after getting that emotional resolution, they then have to work through it, like actually over the course of the show, as opposed to like basically being like, "Oh, she got away from the Spartan, waka waka."
But I do think in terms of, you mentioned earlier you don't think Halsey has an arc. I'm not entirely sure. She might not, but people's understanding of her has an arc.
Yes,
and I think
yes,
maybe
yes,
that's like the story of season 1 of Halo is the unmasking of a monster, right? That like the worst person that the humans deal with is Halsey, and there's so many people who enable her because they think there's some core at which point, like, she is true or authentic, that there's something besides, like, ambition and megalomania for, like, whatever her vision is of perfecting humanity. And all of them proven wrong. That, like, Miranda gets a scene where, like, Halsey is, like, appears to be trying to broker a truce between them. It is just to, like, scan her retina and get into the system. And then it is so funny and cruel that the fucking Flash clone has a heart-to-heart with Miranda and, like, reckons with, like, wow, like, your upbringing has been really complicated, and there are things I hoped and feared for you that I'm worried are coming true. And then it's like, oh, by the way, though, that was a throwaway clone. It was just a facsimile of Halsey. Your mom still never has that conversation with you.
Yeah. I think it's, again, I think that like Halsey is a really good character, and like why I like her in this show. Like I think that like they do a pretty good job of portraying Halsey in some regards. I think occasionally there's some like, well,
because they do no world building with the Covenant to make them seem like any sort of meaningful threat with any sort of politics or direct. The Covenant are just, they are a MacGuffin. For like they do not exist as a world, like a universal threat. They barely are a presence in the entirety of the show, which I'm sure to some degree is budget, right? Like anytime you're going to depict their ships, like the aesthetic is more expensive. Pretty much the entire cast, like they pretty much had to invent this human character, so they had something cheaper to put in these scenes. But like Halsey, like by definition, has to end up being the villain because they just don't have the budget to depict the villains of Halo to any meaningful degree. Like we learn do we have any idea why if you weren't familiar with Halo as a franchise, would you have any reason why the Covenant are doing what they're doing in this show? I don't think the show spends like they're religious zealots like in the franchise. Like that
is what they are.
Like but like we get none of that here in the show.
I mean, there's like a small mention in like the way they refer to the Halo.
Yeah, I think they gesture at that this is a religious theocracy.
But it would be hard to pick up if you didn't already know that. Like knowing, like I still haven't played any of these games, but I've assimilated enough like sideways Halo lore to know that. And so when they mentioned the sacred ring, I'm like, okay, that's what they're talking about. But to somebody who's coming in completely cold, I don't know how that scans. Like it doesn't. I guess you just make the connection that the Halo is a ring, and therefore that's the ring they're talking about, and not accidentally getting confused with the MacGuffin, which is a weird triangle, but technically has a hole in the center. Yeah. So you could kind of call that a ring. Maybe that's what they're talking about.
I mean, it makes sense for like the scope of the show, the budget of the show. Like, you know, you're hoping you're going to get through season 1. It's a success. You can be more ambitious in season 2. So I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons while hey, how do we get people to buy in? Right. And so we buy in, it's so much harder to buy in, even with a larger budget. And like, if the Covenant were on screen, if the elites were on screen more often, does that make it a more emotionally resonant show? Like, no. And so you really can't go, you can't go where Halo needs to go unless you buy into the human characters, which is the opposite of what happens in the games, in which like, we don't give like, Commander Keyes, he's just there to give you your mission, buddy. Like, whereas he at least try to give these characters some nuance so that the audience can hopefully buy in for the like more wild, spectacular stuff that inevitably this show has to go towards. Although I don't know. The end of this, I thought the end of season 1 would be the fall of Reach. That appears to be probably the end of season 2 at the pace that we're going. You know, that seems like such an obvious like touchstone in terms of, hey, if they're centering the Spartans, like the Fall of Reach is going to be really important to telling that story. And then we're actually not going to, I mean, they've shown the ring. I'm sure the ring will appear in season 2, but I get the sense, and maybe it's still for the best. It's like, actually, once we get to this ring, the fuck are we doing here? Like, it's just a bunch of action scenes, you know? I think it's like the storytelling, the closer they get to Halo 1, the game, and they have to like introduce the Flood as a primary antagonist. Do I want to watch that show? Well, I don't.
That is their
I don't know if I
error.
do.
Again, this is why they should not have made the fucking TV show about Master Chief. This is the key thing. Is that like the second they try and retell the story of the Halo video games, they have already fundamentally failed. And like,
and hopefully they don't.
I don't even.
I actually hope. I hope they don't. Because I just don't. I don't know what I'm doing on this. Like being on the Halo sounds extremely boring.
And also like
or does it sound magical and mysterious?
Thank you for the Halo sound, Cado. I don't even know if we'll get the Fall of Reach. Like I legitimately don't know if they're gonna do that. I don't know what the fuck they're gonna do. It is because there's no Spartan 3s. Spartan 3s,
because they've alluded to the fact that they try to like hive off all ships from like letting anyone backtrace them to UNSC space. So I think like they have like put that marker down of, hey, if the Covenant ever find out where these like places are, it's curtains for everybody.
They crater 11 million people. Like that one city that they show before they decide to like do the double artifact, like the double doink on the artifacts, like the Covenant just showed up and 11 million people are gone, like that, which really does seem to be maybe. And they've mentioned Reach a couple of times. Did they go to the Reach on the show at all, or is it just
Reach
mentioned?
They went to the show is set on Reach. The show is set on Reach.
Well, but also
City.
like,
which by the way,
Reach City. Really, that's the name of the city on Reach.
You have New Alexandria. You have a city. There is a famous city from the video game Halo Reach. It's called New Alexandria. You can just use that. You can just use New Alexandria. It's not fucking hard. It's not hard. It's a better city.
It is if you have to build more sets. And like that is, I think you have to take that. I mean, genuinely, like that's not like knock against the show. I was like, the show can only go so many places, and like you can see it in how they do their storytelling. Like that is built into how they're going to do that. It's like depicting another expensive CGI city. Like I understand how they arrive at Reach is something that people know.
Well, then don't do Reach City.
They're just avoiding the complication.
Reach City and do New Alexandria instead. Don't do Reach City. Do New Alexandria instead. It is so easy.
I have a feeling that like some of the major events are going to parallel what we know from the series, but I also feel like we're off in a alternate Halo universe as well. I think we passed through that threshold when Chief and McKee did it. Like I think that was the moment. It was like we're in a different world now. Like Master Chief can get down.
I want to know what acting notes were given to the actress who plays Cortana during the scene where she's witnessing John fuck. Like what was that? What was written on the page? Where is the script that explains the emotional feeling that Cortana is supposed to be having as she's watching her man? You know, I don't know if he was enjoying it, but he was.
She talks about it. She talks about it later. When she was like, someone goes, "Did you feel it?" And she was like, "Sure did." Which, by the way,
they got that oxytocin.
So oh my fucking God. Rob, can I return to something you were talking about a little bit ago?
Yeah.
Regarding Halsey. The thing I love about that character is the ways in which you describe the show as being about unmasking a monster. And I think that is true. But the thing is that they know that they have a monster in Halsey. They know that they have a fascist nightmare woman who is like horrible to deal with. But the fundamental gambit of Halsey, of keeping Halsey around, is that you have the smartest woman who has ever fucking lived. And you know that she cares about humanity. And therefore, you're like, she loves humanity so much, she will not be a threat to us because her goal is keeping humanity safe and protected. Right, that is her stated goal. The problem is that she has a different definition of humanity from everyone else, and that is the thing that I really like about the character, is that like, that is the reveal, is that like, you know you have a nightmare woman around, and you think that you have control. It is similar to the Spartans where you think that you know what this person wants. You have no fucking clue what the person actually wants, and I think that kind of whips. I think that rules, personally.
She's the most interesting character going into season 2. Is I don't know what she's capable of, what she's willing to do, and actually having her off and separated from the UNSC is like really interesting. I'm a little surprised they killed off her little assistant though. She's gonna have to get another little gremlin by season 2.
I loved watching that worm get fucking owned.
Maybe they can every season.
Watching that worm get owned is the best part of the TV show.
Maybe. Oh, what if she clones him? Oh, please, just bring him back so that Kai can just.
God. We should probably dig into the question bucket a little bit here, Patrick.
Sure.
You put out feelers early here. You invited interrogation.
I did. Let's see. Okay. We had one for Ren, and this one starts off with an apology from, I don't get everyone's names in this, but this person put it in this question for a specific reason. From Master Leaf. Yes, this name is a decision made in 2004 as a 14-year-old. Apologies. Hey, we all have, look, my first online username was Extremer with a capital X, which became Exy later, which was better. We all have our AIM sins. Anyway, from Master Leaf. Question for everyone, but mostly for Ren. Being the Halo lore queen, what do you think a 1-to-1 adaptation of Fall of Reach would have made for better TV? My disappointment in the show grew with every episode, but I wonder if I simply don't know TV and that trying direct adaptations wouldn't go as well. Is the attempt to make book stories valid for TV the factor in receiving head-scratching decisions like cartoonishly evil UNSC officers pulling a Last Jedi on Quan and giving one of the few AAPI actors absolutely nothing for a story, or Master Cheeks in the sheets?
I think that the Fall of Reach, in the version of the Halo show that is good to me, the Fall of Reach is part of it, right? I think that the version of Halo the Halo show that I like is an anthology series that goes over various parts of these characters' lives and gets to show their arc in full, right? I want to see the training, right? Like that is interesting to me, right? I want to see the fall of Reach. I want to see the collapse of the Spartan 3 program. And like the way you do that is you build an actual anthology series over the course of like a while that then ends with the fall of Reach. I think doing a straight adaptation of the book as written is a bad idea. I think that setting, the fall of Reach, is a really interesting setting for a television show, but to do it properly, you have to actually understand how to like assemble an ensemble cast.
Is there anything in the show that will make me care about the aliens as much as Keith David's Arbiter did? I mean, the Arbiter has to be. I guess they
hold on
in the timeline.
McKee,
yeah.
Oh my god!
Can't care about McKee?
Fucking hate
McKee the
so
human
much.
that happens to be on the alien side, so they don't have to use CG.
She's a girl of two worlds.
Also,
one of those worlds is planning on killing her. Both of those worlds plan to kill. Point is, things are complicated over there. And really wasn't complexity the entire point of the Arbiter?
The fundamental... So to wrap around to Halo lore for a second, why I think McKee is such a frustrating thing is that in Halo, up until 4, 5, and Infinite, which changes some things slightly, I think that those things are not changed as significantly as other people do. That's neither here nor there. The thing that is special about humanity is that the Forerunners were like, we're going to give these fucking idiots the ability to run the Halo array and no one else. And that is the fundamental frustration of the Covenant, is that the Covenant has spent so long obsessing over the Forerunners and being like, we worship the Forerunners, we worship their prophecies, all of this. And then they try and use any of it and it doesn't work. And they're like, what the fuck? And then humanity uses it and they're like, those stupid pieces of shit. I fucking hate you guys for being able to use the fucking technology that we need. And that is why when humans go to the Halo array, the Covenant's like, thank fucking God, someone finally did it, because humanity has to be the ones who do it. And by giving a human, like a central human character to the Covenant, that fundamental frustration and like motivation for the war disappears. Just totally disappears by like having a quote unquote blessed one who can interact with Forerunner artifacts.
Hey, Halo Waypointers. I wanted to ask, if you're writing a story set 500 years in the future, what piece of modern technology would still be around? I say an electric can opener. This question comes in from James.
Does the combustion engine never really die out?
No.
I
Are we
believe
fucking
that
driving
warthogs
gas cars in 500 years? What's the Warthog?
Some version of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think warthogs run on hydrogen. Warthogs run either on hydrogen or they are partially electric. Let me check.
That'd be funny.
I think like a bottle opener. I think no matter how advanced technology gets, if I'm like opening a beer, like what is technology going to solve that's going to make it better than just grabbing a nifty little tool and taking that off? Yeah. Like there's nothing to improve. It exists. Yeah. We're here. Yeah. Like we just need to solve the hangover part. Well, actually, don't. It's probably a good punishment. Don't solve that part. Just maybe make it a little bit easier. But I think like a bottle opener is just gonna stick around. Like where would that go? The twist cap? Not as fun. Not as fun. It is not nearly as enjoyable. Maybe after the third one, I'd be okay with the twist cap if I'm drinking like some 6-packs. Like, okay. Maybe the improvement is like a 6-pack. The first one, I've got to pry off. The other ones, we can just twist off.
I do hope that the corkscrew dies out, because that's a place where I do want the twist cap to like take over. I hope in like 500 years, people are like, can you believe they used to put synthetic cork in the next of these, just for tradition, and the fact that people associated more convenient and modern packaging with poor quality.
They don't even have to change
primitive
cork.
Society.
They don't even have to change cork. They can just use the pop top corks on everything, because you can pull those off. Why don't they just do that?
Pop top corks?
Yeah, when you get bubbly, like Prosecco or whatever, the corks in that have the little bulbous end because you have to be able to pull it off. You can't corkscrew those. Why isn't that just the standard for every wine?
Because I want to, because that's still kind of a pain in the ass to open.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
And also it's harder to put back in.
Putting back in is not. You're finishing that bottle.
Done.
You open a bottle, you finish the bottle.
No, you are not. That's bullshit. Like you can, like wine is fine. Like
I have one of those metal ones with like a little bit of rubber. That's like a little like I guess it's a cone.
Then you'll fall into the like I'm gonna pump inert gas into the bottle so that it doesn't like. You go full on like I want to save this and have it be just as good a week from now.
No, I think it has a shelf life of like a day. I think usually, this is like I'll finish this in the morning situation.
In my 500.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like in my 500 year later sci-fi show, I think that most things stay the same. Like, I feel like we got some things in one. Like, I don't want to see a laser can opener. I just want to see most day-to-day objects will remain fucking identical. Right. And that is that is hard sci-fi to me, is like that 90% of objects remain totally identical and that other 10% is fucking weird. And I like that. I like that dissonance.
Where you don't know what the object does.
One of my favorite like silly sci-fi things in a show is in Cowboy Bebop, the top ramen that comes with its own heater and water. Like you pull a little string, but the cup otherwise looks exactly the same. It's very funny.
Why would you do that? I love it.
It's ridiculous, but I love it. Yeah.
We asked this in the pre-show, but I think we still need people to weigh in. Does Cortana still have a dump truck in this?
No.
She has an ass, but it's like fine. It's like it's average. It's average.
I feel like we didn't get enough shots to really see, but in my mind it's fucking flat as a board.
At the fan Q&A with the showrunners. So hey, didn't get a good sense of Cortana's ass in this one. Look, does the Halo series have a very questionable history with the depiction of Cortana's body? Yes, but does she have a dump truck, and will that change in season 2 when the showrunners change?
Derp69 in the chat, John stole her cheeks. Now John was caked up.
That's true. John was caked up. God.
Wait, we didn't actually. It didn't come up, but it actually didn't kind of. When we watched the pilot, Cortana wasn't present. We've somehow gotten this far into this conversation without discussing Cortana, except in the context of her dramatic reaction to John having sex. But what did we make of the fairly unique way they chose to depict Cortana visually in the show? I don't know that I ended up liking it. I hated it less as I went along, but I don't know if that was just acceptance for the depiction or not.
Sounds like
they
Stockholm Syndrome.
Made her blue. They should have just made her blue. It would have fixed the way that character looks if they had just made her blue. I would have been fine with the way she looked if she was fucking blue all the way. As opposed to this like blue toned
She's fine.
I don't like it.
Like I think, you know what? They did a really good job. Like it's a little bit her from the movie Her, but also she's got that Tinkerbell problem of being like approximate to the magical boy that she's destined to spend her existence around, but also fatally removed from him. And I think that I think her uncanny valley lack of blueness sort of brings that tragedy to life.
I don't like looking at her.
I don't like looking at her.
Like at all.
Wow, Cado, on the record, I don't like looking at women.
She feels keenly rejected by Chief, by other people. Like that whole scene with McKee, that was like the dog looking at people doing it on the bed, being like, "Oh, I guess you guys like each other more than me." I am neglected and forgotten.
It's so bad.
Oh.
There was strong Ricardo energy when Cado made his assessment of Cortana.
I have
No.
Rob, do you want me to reveal the thing that I revealed before the stream that hasn't come up yet? I watched the entire Halo TV series in one sitting. Like I
knowing
watched,
full
I
well,
watched, I watched
2
episodes,
weeks ago.
No. I watched episodes as I watched half of the episodes as they came out, and then I was like, all right, to get ready for this podcast, I am going to watch all 9 episodes of this television show in sequence. Finishing when my friends were watching the final episode on Discord. And you know what? I made it. I started at 4 p.m. and I finished at 11:01 p.m.
What did it cost?
Wasn't great, but I can say that like being able to experience the show in full and see the narrative arcs and the things that they were trying to do and what they did fuck up and what they didn't fuck up in that immediate succession was really interesting to me. And being able to be like, okay, cool. Here is where the show is diverging from the games. And if I had watched it episode by episode in a traditional sense, the time between episodes would have led to me having a pretty different read of the show. And I'm actually pretty happy that I did it. And feel like I was able to appreciate some things about it more and be less frustrated by other things in like the final episode. My friends were very frustrated with a lot of things in the final episode. And I was like, no, this is par for the course. As someone who's watched 9 hours of this in one sitting, it is like...
Well, I mean, that's the classic, people who, like Cado, like going back and shotgunning a show like Lost as opposed to sitting
we're not shotgunning.
Well, but you're watching it faster than
That's
I did.
true. That's true. We don't have the gaps, but two a week max. So there's a little bit of space.
The like shotgunning of episodes like allows you to like mentally paper. In some ways, you can examine a show differently. In other ways, it allows you to like mentally paper over weaknesses of a show in a way that's beneficial to the show. I bet Lost is a better show watched faster than I did at the time, where you then spend 4 months on message boards, like examining screenshots in a way that the producers never intended the audience to do. One small thing that I'm shocked they kind of kept this in. So this started as a show that was going to air on Showtime, and then eventually it moved to Paramount Plus. But most shows in the streaming era do have like breaks in the action that are kind of the equivalent of a cut to commercial, but like the Halo series like constantly has these like moments where we like cut to black and a break, and it feels like, oh, this is where an ad goes. And I don't think it like breaks. I don't think it like breaks the momentum of the show necessarily. It was like such an odd little quirk that you just don't really notice as much unless you're watching like a Better Call Saul or something on a traditional cable network where in Better Call Saul, like I feel like if you're doing it right, you're like really weaving in the commercial breaks as part of the tension. And instead in Halo, it mostly just felt like kind of perfunctory in an odd way. Anyway, also
yeah, Paramount Plus does have ads, so I believe they kept it in because there's a certain tier that keeps the ads.
Right there, yeah. Get ready, Netflix subscribers. I guess that's the point. You won't be a subscriber. You'll just be like, time to get my free Netflix on. Here's the same 5 ads again and again.
I would rather have Netflix as for what I pay for it now, in which they've already said the kids stuff won't have ads. I would rather have ads. I would rather pay for the cheaper one so that I can use it as a conduit for kid shows and not what I pay for it now. Ad tiers are okay because they never put it on the kid stuff. So it works out for me. I don't know. A lot of these questions are the same of, like how does this show read to an audience that, is not interested in the games? I don't know. The show is successful enough to get a second season, but also Paramount Plus is desperate for content. So I don't know that I would take away a season 2 as being
Is it?
like a
It was renewed. It was renewed before. It was renewed before the show came out.
Right.
So it was less that it was successful enough to get a second season, more like they booked it for 2 seasons.
Just apparently,
it's also just cheaper to start a second season show that you've already got in production than it is to start a show from scratch. So, sorry, go ahead, Cado.
I was just gonna say, like, that's like a common practice these days with TV shows, is that they're actually booked for the first 2 seasons always, but they like hold it back as like some sort of like, you know, reveal.
Yes.
But most shows are actually booked immediately with 2, unless they like really, really fucking tank. They're already making the second season.
What would your ideal date night with Master Chief be?
Well,
Where would you
first,
take John?
Push downstairs.
well, we would meet in a pastoral field on the sacred ring.
God damn it. I wasn't
And
ready. Fuck.
Then he and I would lock eyes and stride towards one another. And he would place his hand on my cheek. And it would be the most erotic thing that's ever happened to me in my existence. I would realize that humans are not ugly. They are beautiful. And I would turn into his gentle paw and look as if I'm about to nibble it. But instead, just the sexual tension will sweep us away as we contemplate the sky. And then, of course, he would take me to his black site prison and lock me inside an Airbnb and introduce me to his mom, who would be like, "My son is very sweet, isn't he? I'm so happy you guys are together. But also, he's a dumb piece of shit, and humanity is evil, so I need you to betray him." And then I would be like, this is all a little bit much. And then, of course, you know, he and I would realize our common bond, and we'd, you know, it's a little sudden, but, you know, not a lot of time for romance. You just got to go to bed with John. And then you do your nails. Perfect night.
And then you do your nails.
All right, I think we can take this podcast out. I don't know what we're supposed to do after that.
Fuck.
Push downstairs.
Cado, you should just let that music keep playing.
Yeah.
Like at the point that you should just let it.
I'm scared. I don't want to get fucking sued by Marty McDonald.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
he will.
He will.
He will. He will.
I'm half.
Well, I don't know.
Not
Can
a
you,
friend
I'm half convinced
not
that-
a friend of Waypoint.
I'm half convinced that the reason it doesn't show up in the show is that pending lawsuit. Like, it's like barely in there for like
Probably.
6 seconds.
Probably. I bet it's.
DMCA
You know
is
what?
like 80%.
Hold on. I should do the outro. Hey, that'll do it for this week's Waypoints. We hope you've enjoyed the break. Please be sure to rate and
Wait, is
review
this
us on your
Waypoints
podcast
now?
platform of choice,
What
if it allows
podcast
such a
are we
thing.
on?
He introduced it
I
that
think we're
way,
a 5-star
producer.
podcast, but it's not for me to say.
It's been a long
Cado will
week.
edit out these people interrupting my outro.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll be back again with Waypoint Radio on Friday.
Monday.
This is going up on Monday.
This is going up on Monday. Fuck, I fucked it up. Oh shit, I have
So
to
it
hit
is-
publish on
Cado,
the
you are-
podcast. Fuck.
How many
Fuck.
times? Can we get? Is this Ricardo? Can we get a producer back?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Cado, get it the fuck together and play the song that Marty McDonald doesn't have the balls to.
Isn't it
Play
is it
Ocean.
McDonald? You keep saying
Play
McDonald.
Ocean.
Isn't it Marty
Cado, play
McDonald?
Ocean.
Bye.
McDonald?
You got me thinking of the coast and the ocean where the ladies all get their tans. I'm laying next to the sweet little honey where the ocean meets the sand. I got it bad, I wanna be by the ocean. I miss the sound of all the local commotion. Oh, spin me around and my feet off the ground.
I thought we were gonna get to hear Ocean.
I thought the point was take us out on Ocean. I didn't get Ocean pulled up anyways, but it's fine.
What?
It's not fun. You missed Ocean.
That's not.
I summoned
I don't
Ocean.
have
That is
Ocean
not-
loaded because that was a joke from the other VMix session that's in the office, and not the one that I have here in my house. Sorry. I'm finding Ocean right now. Right now? Yeah, we're live.
Live again?
We're making ocean sounds.
Not bad though. You got so Oh,
Damn it, shit! I cut it too early. Oh.